Kate, you will bring us up to speed on.
Yes, and I'll do the usual
GCA.
thing of that moment of trepidation as I try and put my PowerPoint up.
There we are.
Stand by. Okay.
Morning, Martin. Morning, Corinda.
That looks promising.
It does. That looks very promising.
Marvelous. Thank you, everybody. I'm looking around the faces, and a good number of you I actually recognise. So this is that balance between making people aware of who we are and what we do, versus boring the pants off the rest of you who already know who we are. But just a really quick summary. So my name is Kate Oldershaw. I have the rather grand title of Associate Director Sustainability, which I should point out has nothing to do with sustaining our environment. Unfortunately, it's organizational sustainability, and that is actually a change in role since we last spoke. And I only mention it because it's rather relevant to what's been happening with GCA. So I wanted to bring you up to speed with GCA as an organization, so you understand what we're doing. But for those of you who I don't know, so we are a global not-for-profit organisations with our roots in law enforcement by virtue of the fact we were founded by the New York City District Attorney's Office and the City of London Police, but also the Centre of Internet Security. 2015, when effectively cybercrime began to trump physical crime, which is always a little scary. And our mission in life is to reduce global cyber risk and to enable a secure and trustworthy internet for everyone. My friend always refers to it as democratizing cybersecurity, because we don't want financial or finance to be a barrier to at least basic cyber hygiene. So this is where it's particularly relevant for individuals and small businesses. Obviously, large multinationals have millions to throw at their own personal cybersecurity, but it's those that are left behind that don't, and it's those that we particularly aim to serve. Now, previously GCA was set up regionally, and my own focus, and that of my associate Andy Bates, was the UK, Middle East, and India. And we had an EU office, and we had an Americas office. I say office, we are actually, I think, trying to get my numbers right, we're only about 27 in total across the whole organization. But we had a bit of a strategic review, because we came to realize that not only internally did we sometimes struggle to explain what we do, some of our closest and trusted partners struggled to articulate what we do and where we added value. They felt in their heart that we did, and they could talk of their own particular engagement with us as being a positive thing. So we started to sort of look internally and try and understand who we are and what we're doing. And as a consequence of that review, instead of focusing regionally, we decided to focus on programs, which I'll come to shortly. But one of our USP really is that as a not-for-profit, we're a neutral third party, and we have that ability to bring together organizations that are generally natural commercial competitors in order to act for the common good. And this has held us in really good stead for a number of our projects that we've been doing. And it's particularly relevant when, in my role as organizational sustainability, we start looking at, grant funding and the like. But I mentioned that we've moved into two programs, and those two programs are capacity and resilience and internet integrity. So what we've done previously is almost to try and help every individual small business with one of our products, and discovered that that's completely impossible, and it's just not scalable. So we shifted our focus to what we're referring to as midstream and upstream. And the midstream angle is very much about working with partners, and everything we do is through our partners in order for them to distribute, to give us scale to distribute our solutions and to work with us. The upstream element is actually looking, simplifying it, at the pipes of the internet and the infrastructure, and how we can work with large organizations and indeed governments to actually fix some of those inherent problems. My colleague always has this great analogy that, his mother can go and plug in her kettle and feels fairly secure that that the electricity is going to be safe. But in this day and age, when you plug in your computer, you can't make that guarantee. But there are certain things, for example, ISPs can be doing that can actually bring internet security to your home. They're just choosing not to do it, or they come up with some reason not to do it because they want to make a commercial aspect out of that work. Like I say, everything we do is through partners. Oh, I'm going whizzing past. Sorry, trigger happy. And just to give you an idea, we have two partnership sort of sides, and one are our standard partnership, and that's based on organizational size. And then we have our premium partners, of which we currently have 17, and you can see the names here. Some very big names, and they absolutely believe in GCA's mission, and they will afford finances, resources, get involved with us in projects. So the capacity and resilience program. So this is the one that is what we would refer to as the midstream thing. This is about trying to give resilience to cyber risk, to enable that social and economic growth. And we have two products under that particular label. Now, one is the GCA Cybersecurity Toolkit. I say toolkit in the singular. We actually have 3 separate toolkits, which I'll touch on in a moment, and the GCA Cyber Flipbook. I'm not going to dwell on the Flipbook, principally because it's not actually relevant to UK shores. We were given the code for the Flipbook by, I think it was City of London Police, and British police are already using a variant of this. So this is actually something we've been trying to roll out overseas. And we've been in conversations, for example, with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who are very keen to have this. And basically it allows, you know, police on the ground. So I'm a former police officer. So I would, back in my career, I would know nothing about tackling a cybercrime. It gives me the knowledge and what are my steps I need to do to secure evidence and take that evidence through to prosecution and that sort of thing. So that's a training device being used by law enforcement overseas, or we hope it will be. But the cybersecurity toolkit is one of the things that brought me to the cluster, because I was aware, obviously, you have your own version and a very good version and guidance it is too. But the difference between yours and mine, or mine, I'm being very possessive, ours, is that ours are actually physical tools. So they are tools you can go and implement. And we have 3 toolkits, as I mentioned. One is directed towards small businesses. The other is towards election and small election offices. Again, not really relevant to our own shores. At the time, it was sponsored by Craig Newmark, who you may know the name in Craigslist, because he's a big advocate of democracy, and he wanted something to shore up some of the democratic aspects of US politics, as we all know has been fun and games. And the other one is journalists. Well, it's for journalists, it's basically for human rights defenders. Obviously people in areas, thankfully not so much our own, but for independent journalists and newsrooms, teaching them how to protect their the data they hold, the integrity of their email communication. So, all around the world, journalists and human rights defenders are being targeted by non-democratic governments and the like. And this is a toolkit that we've devised, and we've had. I'm trying to think where we've been rolling it out. We were in conversations with the likes of Mexico and Ukraine over there. The small business toolkit is in 5 languages, all the core languages: English, French, German, Spanish, and the one that's out of left field, as you'll see, is Bahasan, which I confess I'm going to put my hand up, never heard of. It's actually the language of Indonesia. And that came about because we did some work with MasterCard Centre for Inclusive Growth and the Mercy Corps Micro Mentor digital platform, which is a bit of a mouthful, in order to make the small business toolkit available to their small businesses. So obviously it required translation in the first instance, but it also then required training to individuals on the ground to then provide training to the small businesses. That goes back to the point, we don't train small businesses, we train the trainer, and that's how we work. We have actually introduced a new concept called Toolkit Flex, because our previous toolkit, every time we devised a new one, it was a very labor-intensive process, and we've devised a new toolkit approach for building toolkits, which is much more flexible and much quicker. And we are in the process of building one for mission-based organizations. And we say mission-based rather than not-for-profit, because there could be ones that are social enterprises that class themselves as mission-based, not-for-profit charities and so forth, pretty much anything with a .org. And this has been sponsored by the Public Interest Registry, who actually manage .org. That will be going live shortly. And we are also building one for individuals. Now, fundamentally, behind the tools behind a lot of these toolkits don't vary. There will be some that are specific to the digital vulnerable group, but they don't necessarily vary. But it's the language that we use. In fact, only yesterday I was in conversation with Andrew about the veterans, and it's about bringing people in and them seeing language that they understand and can recognize and can work with. And that's what we do with a lot of these toolkits. There's also talk of doing one for the elderly. It breaks my heart when I hear of the older generation being targeted because of their own ignorance about cybersecurity. So we're looking at that as a possibility. What I wanted just to, so that I talked about everything through partners. So Train the Trainer, for example, Small Business Toolkit, we've been working with large financial institutions, NatWest, Lloyds, in order to train their small business teams. So when they go out into the community, they can talk to their small businesses. The MasterCard one I touched on. We also did one for, we've got a GCA ambassador who works in Liberia. And he came to us and said, listen, can you do something for our women in small businesses? And we had 80 people cramming into a room in Liberia with very ropey internet signal, really keen to hear about small business. And apparently the feedback from that was tremendous. And so it's that sort of thing that we're really keen to do to get to the lesser known areas, or those that really need basic cybersecurity. The other program is the Internet Integrity Program. So like I say, I'm not technical. So my very simple analogy, this is the pipes of the internet. And that's what we're looking at doing some work on. And again, while I say we keep doing a thing through partners, this is a very real thing, because we recognize these problems cannot be solved by any one organization. And so working together is absolutely crucial. And we have two programs for this: AID, which stands for Automated IoT Defense Ecosystem, and Domain Trust, which is all about sharing of the data, malicious domain data amongst the community to allow them to not only shore up their own defenses, but ultimately share it with the registries and registrars, and indeed the ISPs, with a view to having it blocked and hopefully also taken down. And that data is shared within the Information Commissioner's Office, sharing data for good principles. And that, I'll come back to that shortly, and just very quickly focus on AID. So AID is a honey farm, a global honey farm of sort of 1,200 nodes based around the world, capturing information of attacks on IoTs. Now, it was originally devised for the Mara botnet, which Shadow Server built. Through our relationship with Shadow Server, we took it on and we repurposed it. It currently contains 12 terabytes of IoT data, and it's recording 9.5 million attacks every day, which is a phenomenal amount. And the stories we've got of late are through three pieces of work, which we're very proud of. And the first one is we did a report with Microsoft. And based on the data, the real IoT attack data from our platform, they were able to start providing factual evidence on the validity of the most widespread policies and standards on IoT security around the world. I'll provide this later to you, Robin, because there are links behind all of these in articles.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, lovely.
The other one, obviously more familiar to most of us, is Which, the consumer group. We're probably where most of us will have some form of IoT device in our house. I certainly just do. I've got a Hive, and I've got I'm going to say Alexa quietly, so it doesn't stop chiming in. And even webcams and so on and so forth. And they did a piece of research with us and the NCC group to analyze the vulnerability of the most basic domestic IoT device. And they set up their own house and improvised what a house would look like with the various devices. And they said the attack started very slowly, but then it completely ramped up. And they're looking to use some of this information to try and influence the manufacturers to do something about their IoT devices. Now, I know the government are also setting a minimum standard as to what IoT manufacturers should be implementing. But this is all using our AID platform, which is capturing this data from around the world. The last one is with Singapore, the Singapore government. So this is very specific to Singapore. They have commissioned, or they've been working with our technical team to set up honey farms within Singapore, and in order to analyze attacks on their own cyberspace. And then we're feeding that information back to them specifically and only them. And this is a project that we would be quite keen to roll out in different parts of the world. And so obviously we're always keen to instigate conversations with different countries and different governments to see if this is something that would be of value to them as well. Those are the sort of projects we've been doing on AIDS and successes of late. The next one on domain trust, like I said, that was a sort of our baby, as it were, my colleague Anders and myself, which was all about data sharing. We have over 4 million malicious domains in there at the moment. One of our biggest partners is actually Scam Advisor. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're based in the Netherlands. It's one of those sites you can go to interrogate, to see whether a website that you're looking at, it's almost like a Trustpilot review of websites, and it'll give you any update on whether that website has been involved in scams, or we believe it's been involved in scams. So we got a lot of their data. We have data from 12 partners at the moment, including an American law enforcement agency, with BT, Central NIC, and many others, PIR, URID, who are in charge of .eu, all collaborating, all sharing data between them as partners and collaborating partners. But like I say, the next stage for us is really to try and engage more with registries and registrars. That's the goal. But if that doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, because they themselves are using this to reinforce their own backbone. But it's also being blocked by our own Quad 9 as well, so it's beneficial. And our next step is trying to connect with certs, both commercial and government certs. The other thing, just very quickly, because I'm very conscious of time, our other successes in the last year. So I know you're very familiar with Cyber First. For the second year running, we have just been awarded the SME Industry Champion Award for 2020. I keep having to think of the dates because, of course, it's the year before. So we've done 2019 and 2020, and we're very proud of the work we've been doing with young students who come and join us over the summer months. And we give them practical hands-on experience, both with us and also with our partners, where they can not only get to learn sort of business practices, but also in some instances be involved in research and coding and things like that. The other one, 159, it's a little left field. I mean, I always, my internal colleagues say, oh, it's nothing to do with cyber, why we're doing it. Well, the reality is a lot of the smishing and phishing we get come from malicious domains. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a connection. We're all, if any of us fall foul of fraud, the question is, would we know where to go? We may be familiar with sending text on to 7726, which spells out spam. We may be familiar with sending phishing emails on to report@phishing.gov.uk. The majority of the public don't know this, and they don't know, they panic about getting in contact with their bank if something goes wrong. What we're trying to do is to get around the power of smishing and phishing text by saying this is a globally, in the same way that everybody knows 999, people know 112, the Americans have 911. We've worked with BT and Lloyds and various other banks to introduce 159. Now, that was our initiative, which we instigated with Lloyds, but we have since handed the operational side of it over to Stop Scams. And it's in pilot phase at the moment, and it's with the Lloyds Banking Group and all their banks, so Halifax and Bank of Scotland, and similarly with NatWest, RBS Ulster, Santander, Barclays, Starling and TSB. So like I said, that's in a phase now. So I would actively encourage you to speak to your friends and family and say, listen, heaven forbid that this happens to you, but 159 is live. Now, obviously in the future, as the project gets more evidence, and the numbers already, although I'm not officially allowed to talk about them, are, I was going to say very impressive. One wishes they weren't, but they are in terms of what we've actually managed to stop. So 159 is in pilot phase, and hopefully other organisations will come online in the future. At the moment, it's all push button, you know, press 1 for Barclays, press 2 for Halifax, but they're looking to take that to, I think, the automated voice that we all love to hate when we ring up these organisations. And that's I was going to say a quick 20-minute quick snapshot of what